these conversations, they look so different for everyone, and they bring with them a lot of complexities, a lot of different perceptions, and a lot of different individual life experiences. So just accepting what you and your loved ones are feeling without trying to place a judgment on them of being, good, bad, right, or wrong, that can be really helpful.
Welcome to the Inheritance of Hope podcast. Every day, 562 children lose a parent to terminal illness. They shouldn't have to face that alone. You can pretend to avoid the painful realities of illness, grief, and death, or you can deal with the real stuff in caring community. On the podcast, people in Inheritance of Hope's community share raw, personal stories of pain, trials, and the shadow of death, which are also stories of joy in terminal illness. Find more Inheritance of Hope community at inheritanceofhope.org. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Inheritance of Hope podcast. I'm Ellie, your host. And continuing on the theme of legacy this month in May, it is National Legacy Month, so we are unpacking what legacy looks like through different lenses and in different lights. And today we will be talking about how to have legacy conversations with the people you love. And as all relationships are, these conversations can be really messy. Things can come up. It's not a comfortable topic that most of us have navigated. So we have someone here to talk us through how to do this in an emotionally regulated way, in a way that honors both yourself and the other person, and just tips for success. So I'll pass the microphone off. Go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your background.
Hi, everybody. I'm Kim. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist in California. I also volunteer with Inheritance of Hope, providing the one-on-one support sessions for free. I offer 2 of those, and you can find out how to sign up on the website. I help families and individuals that are going through a cancer experience, end of life conversations, and I'm also a grief counselor. I am also a believer. I also have a background in child life, having worked in the hospital setting and volunteering for a few years.
We'll link in the show notes how to find Kim and her partnership with Inheritance of Hope to offer those free support sessions. Find that in the description because that is such a valuable resource. And as you'll learn throughout this podcast episode, she's just very calming and would be a great person to chat with, especially if you want to unpack what we're going to talk about in this episode a little bit more and maybe what it looks like in your own personal relationships. She's here to support you. I want to start off by asking, when you hear the phrase legacy conversations, what does that actually mean in real life?
It's one of those things that can look really different for each person. It's okay that it looks different for everybody because these conversations are going to unfold. They're dependent on the type of relationship that we have with our loved ones. So sometimes it's a complicated relationship. It's strained. Sometimes it's really close and it's really bonded. And so it's really important to frame our legacy conversations in that light, just so that everybody can give themselves some grace, because it's really, really difficult. It's not something that we've ever been trained. This is how you speak to someone when this situation is going on.
I love how you said that of we weren't trained for this, and a lot of times it's not modeled in our families, in our relationships. Communication is hard and people tend to avoid hard conversations. So when those two mix, it gets really messy, and giving ourselves grace that it hasn't probably been modeled for us super well. Why do you think people tend to avoid these conversations even when they know they matter? And then what's at stake if we don't have them?
So I think that we avoid these conversations because they are really uncomfortable and they could be really awkward. And also, sometimes we get caught up in the fear of how we might feel, how we're going to make our loved ones feel. So I think it's really important to just start off by paying attention to the way that your emotions feel in your body when you're just thinking about having the conversation before you even do it, and just notice what sensations are there, because that can tell us a lot about how uncomfortable or even scary these conversations can feel. And this is just our body going into that fight, flight, freeze response because the topic feels unsafe. And so, in these moments, just noticing what's going on inside of you and just breathing deeply and slowly, and remind yourself that even though it's feeling scary, it's going to be okay and you're safe. And the other thing that's really helpful is try not to predict how you think it's going to go or be, or try to be a fortune teller, because we don't have that ability. And so these are the moments when praying or keeping a Bible verse in your mind is a wonderful help. And one of my favorite ones is Joshua 1:9, where the Lord tells Joshua to be strong and courageous rather than terrified or dismayed, because the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. So even in the midst of these conversations, the Lord is right there with us.
That's such a good practical approach. And when we start to notice these sensations or feeling intimidated, feeling nervous and anxious about it, what other small steps can we take as we approach maybe initiating this conversation with someone, or maybe on the drive over to the conversation where we're meeting the person? What are some other practical tips that you have for that?
First and foremost, if I'm just thinking about cognitive behavioral therapy, we have a triggering event and then we have thoughts, right? It's the story we tell ourselves about what is about to happen or what just happened. And then we have emotions that result from that. And then we get sensations in our body and then we take action. So if we can catch it at the thought process and keep our thoughts in, a positive place and don't allow them to spiral out in a really negative, catastrophic way, I think that can be really helpful. And we're going to think those things, and we're going to feel those emotions, feel scared, feel anxious, all of that. But if we can just take hold of our breath, that is something that we can help our body to kind of get back into regulation. So, taking that deep breath for like a count of 4 in through your nose, very slowly, deep down in the belly, like where your belly button is. You want your belly to expand out when you take that breath instead of it being up here in your chest. Breathing in through your nose and then breathing out with pursed lips for like a count of 7 or 8. And that just really slows it down, and it tells the nervous system to go back into the rest and digest mode, which is how you feel when you're just kind of going through your everyday life. So that can be some practical steps to take to kind of calm yourself and ready yourself for the conversation.
I also want to say, if you are approaching these kinds of conversations, you might not feel nervous about them. That's also normal. And so I don't want this to feel like a very daunting, scary thing that if you do this, you're going to feel anxious. No, it could be. It could bring up things, especially if relationships are in maybe a more tumultuous place. But I also want to reference a previous episode with Lisa Paul. We talk about creative ways to have conversations about end of life. It can also be these legacy conversations. And I think she does a great job of unpacking that maybe more shallow entrance into it, where sometimes we are maybe put in positions where it's like, oh, we're jumping into the deep end and we don't have much of a choice. And so every story is going to look different. Listen to that one if you need maybe more slower entrances into things. But we also are very aware that a lot of us have relationships that produce anxiety when we know we're about to have hard conversations with people. So these are great tips.
Absolutely. I'm glad you brought that up, because these conversations can be a source of connection and bonding, right? Where you're sharing with a smile how you want your legacy to look like and how does that unfold. And it could be a really special time that your loved one looks back on with fond memories.
Are there any specific prompts or themes that people can use to guide the conversation?
Just start the conversation off by checking in with your loved one, or even just preempting the conversation. Those can be really good ways to prepare them. So I have a couple of examples. If you're going to be talking about financial things, you might start it off with, would it be okay if we talked about my will and what I'm leaving behind after I'm gone? If we're talking about a relational theme, maybe the prompt might be, I'm having a lot of thoughts about our relationship and how much you mean to me. Would it be okay if I shared those thoughts with you? And then the carrying forward theme, which is kind of the things that we can leave our family with to do in remembrance of us. A great way to introduce that is I'm thinking about all of the beautiful holidays that we've had together and the special things that we do as a family. Can we create a list together so that you guys can keep doing some of those things after I'm gone? Those can be great ways to start the conversation. Some people, they don't do well with having things sprung on them. They need a little bit of preparation, and we know our loved ones best. So if you have a loved one that's like that, you can start the conversation out by that. You can even say, "Hey, I have something serious I need to talk to you about. Can you let me know when you're ready?" Right? That can be another way
Mhm.
of doing that.
It sounds like an invitation
Yes.
versus I'm jumping on you. I need to share this right now. It has to be on my timeline because I'm ready for it. It's that the invitation of, hey, I'm ready for this and I want to engage with you in this way. Can I invite you to step into it? Then it's their choice whether they're ready for it or not, whether they step towards it or not. I think is just going to go much further than just that one sentence. Like, can I share this with you? Wow, that is a game changer, honestly. It seems so simple, but it really is going to set you up for so much success.
It is.
In the episode with Lisa talking about creative ways to have conversations about end of life, she does a great job of talking about just that invitation rather than approaching someone and saying, "Hey, have you made a will yet?" Instead, that idea of, "Hey, I haven't made a will yet and I'm going to do it. Can I come over this weekend and we can maybe work on ours together?" Or something along those lines, that invitation versus that finger pointing. The
Mhm.
posture is going to make a huge difference.
Yeah, it's the difference between openness and defensiveness. So yeah, those
Yes.
invitations are really important.
So, what happens if you want to start a conversation like this and the other person kind of just says, "I don't want to talk about this," or they start talking about it and things kind of start shutting down?
Mhm.
How would you handle that situation?
Yeah, that can get really tricky. So, my best advice is to just be patient. Be patient with yourself and with the other person because everyone really handles these types of conversations in different ways. And everyone has what we call a window of tolerance. It's a set window of tolerance. And we use this term in therapy to kind of describe the capacity that someone has for distress. And everybody is unique and different in this. What one person can handle can be far different from what somebody else can handle. So, patience is the key. And I always like to remind people of 1 Corinthians 13, the love chapter, where the Lord describes what love is and all of love's attributes. And the very first thing that he says is patient, right? Love is patient. But I do also want to kind of get into some of the physical signs
Mm.
that you can kind of look for in your loved one that may be feeling overwhelmed. So you might see their facial expressions changing. They might lose eye contact with you or kind of refuse to have eye contact with you. Uncontrollable crying, yelling, or shouting, folding of the arms, or, turning their body away from you. We call that stonewalling, or even that fast, shallow breathing. Like that's something that you can look for. So just remember that it's okay to let someone have a break if they ask for it. That doesn't mean that you're never going to talk about it again or that this is like a bad thing. It's just they're letting you know what they need. And if you're seeing that they might need a break, you can always check in with them. You can, see how they're doing and just ask them if they need a break. And I just want to give a reminder that when you do take a break or the other person needs a break, give it at least an hour before gently trying to jump back in because this gives the nervous system time to get back to its normal state. We call this homeostasis and just kind of that calm rest and digest state. And sometimes for people, they may not be ready after that huge emotional experience to talk about it for another day or two. And that's okay as well. You can just gently jump back into presenting the, hey, can we get back to that conversation? It's really important to me. That's what's helpful in those moments.
Mm. I didn't know about the 1 hour time frame. That's really helpful to know because there's a lot happening in our body and our brains. And so to have someone tell us, here's an actual time to pay attention to is going to be really helpful.
That comes from 40 years of studying couples. The Dr. Gottman and his wife,
Mm.
They are couples counselor specialists, and they have this lab where they are studying physiological signs in people and all of that. And it takes an hour for
Mm.
us to really regulate again. And we need to remember not to, keep ruminating about the conversation and what upset us and what we're going to say when we get back, because that won't get us into that calm state. But yeah, an hour is sufficient time to return to normal again.
So you touched on what happens when the other person might shut down or what's happening maybe for us to notice in their body language, but what about for ourselves?
Yeah.
How can we manage our own emotions or just have a pulse check on what's happening internally for ourselves so we can keep showing up to these conversations well?
If you're aware of what it feels like in your body when you're feeling overwhelmed, it can look different for everybody. Some people, they feel really kind of very restless in their body where they just want to move. And then some people feel really heavy and slow. They feel really tired and exhausted. Sometimes, we'll be able to tell that we're overwhelmed because we have a hot burning stomach, or our heart is racing, or our palms are getting sweaty, or we're shaking, or things like that. Check our breath. Are we breathing really, really shallow, really quickly? Are we holding our breath, right? These things that we can look for in our body can tell us kind of how we are reacting in that moment. And I think it's really good to be able to tell what's happening so that you can stop yourself from saying something that is going to, blow it up, make matters worse. And there is an acronym called THINK that's out there. We teach the kids about it. Is what you have to say truthful? Is it helpful? Is it inspiring? Is it necessary? And is it kind? So these are things that if you're unable to continue in the conversation by applying those principles, then that's also a sign that you might need a break, right? So there's physical signs and there's also those cognitive in your mind kind of signs where it's like, okay, I am not thinking clearly right now. I want to just scream and yell or whatever it might be. And so that could also be a sign that a break is going to be really helpful.
And again, knowing give myself a full hour. Don't try to just go in the other room, catch my breath, try to come back. It doesn't sound like that's going to be helpful. So I think that that 1 hour is just such a good thing to put in your back pocket and be kind to the other person and kind to yourself and normalize that it's okay to have emotions come up and to need that break.
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
Sounds like the window of tolerance idea can be applied to this because some people might be listening to this and be thinking, I don't think I'm going to feel very activated in conversations like this. I think it's going to be normal. It's going to be fine. It might be kind of a breeze. But other people might have that one person in mind, like, ooh, I think there's a conversation or conversations that I need to have, and the relationship is just not good. I have a feeling that's where most of these activating emotions and things will come out is in those relationships. So, what happens if there's unresolved tension or complicated history in a relationship?
It can be really tempting to just set the expectation everything needs to be fixed before I go. But it sets us up for disappointment. I think that, conversations like predictably aren't going to go the way we want them to, not necessarily the exact way that we want them to go. So just trying to have these conversations without that pressure of telling yourself everything needs to be fixed. That is a really important part of it. But just try to make an attempt and, to try to have that conversation with that person, with your loved one. Maybe that's what they're waiting for. Maybe you haven't talked in a while, but that's what they've been waiting for. And, if they aren't ready, then that's okay too. Like, we have to get to a place of acceptance that we can't force things. But when you get to that, if that is the circumstance where nothing can be said or nothing can be fixed because there's a cutoff in the relationship and people aren't speaking anymore, you can still say what you need to say in a letter. You can do it in an audio recording, could do it a song or a video, which IOH has the legacy song and video services. Are you an artist? Paint something, write a poem, make a drawing for them. These can still represent legacy conversations, even if it's one sided for now. And with these types of complicated relationships, there's oftentimes so much anger and resentment and pain involved, and loved ones may just need time to listen to what you have to say and then process those things on their own side at their own pace. So just by reaching out and leaving them even that one-sided part of the legacy conversation, you're giving them the optional gift of healing.
Yeah, it sounds like it's definitely taking what you can in a situation that you might not have chosen or that it's difficult and choosing what you can control because we can't control other people. We can't control what they're thinking or how they're processing through things and the timeline in which they're processing. But taking ownership of it's not ideal, but this is what I have to work with and I'm going to work in it still.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's really important. And that can bring a lot of peace.
Yeah, and I think just all conversations about legacy, I think the underlying foundation of it all is just intentionality. Um, you kind of have to go outside of what the default is to jump into legacy conversations, and that is intentionality. So whether you write a letter or you send a text or it's easy or it's hard, there is intentionality woven through it all.
And I
Mm.
think that legacy speaking, that it leaves the message of you matter to me, and I took this intention to try to give you peace, right? It's a gift for them. And
Yeah.
that is such a beautiful thing to leave with someone.
What's something you wish everyone knew about these conversations?
That it's normal and okay to have all of the emotions that you're feeling, like whatever those are. These conversations, they look so different for everyone, and they bring with them a lot of complexities, a lot of different perceptions, and a lot of different individual life experiences. So just accepting what you and your loved ones are feeling without trying to place a judgment on them of being, good, bad, right, or wrong, that can be really helpful. I really encourage people to think about emotions as little kind of alarms or alerts on your phone that are
Mm.
alerting you to something important, right? Notice how I didn't put a judgment on that. It's not an alert that's telling you that a tornado is coming, right? It's just letting you know that something is present. And that is really the most beautiful function about emotions, is that they can alert us to something and they can be the driving force and the motivation to having these hard conversations with our loved ones.
That non-judgmental posture. Again, it kind of all comes down to posture. I think if
Good.
if you can just kind of look at things non-judgmentally, both in yourself and the other person, that
Yeah.
that posture is going to shape how you feel, how the other person feels, and hopefully gently guide you through something that might feel intimidating for some people. Well, this was all amazing information. Is there anything that we haven't covered yet that you'd like to talk through, or any closing thoughts that you'd like to share?
Yeah, you know what? I realized that you asked me what happens if we don't have these conversations? What's at stake? And I didn't get around to answering that. So
Mm.
I'd love to answer that for your listeners right now.
Yeah.
Okay. So if we think back to those themes that I talked about, so financially speaking, legacy conversations that never happen, they can leave our loved ones with lots of questions, lots of confusion. They may not know how to carry out your wishes, how to manage your estate in ways that are honoring to you. And this can really be an added source of distress on top of the grief that they're already going to be going through. So that can be a real motivating factor to just having the conversation in the first place. In terms of those carry forward conversations for holidays and special occasions, these legacy conversations can help guide your family to knowing how you would like those traditions and culturally important rituals to be carried forward. And if these conversations don't happen, your family may not know exactly how to incorporate you into these occasions in the ways that reflect your values and your priorities for them, right?
Mm.
So that's that's a really important aspect of it. And just keep in mind that these conversations can be really beautiful, really connecting and bonding. And the Lord created us for connection with one another. So these are moments that, if you can just remember, they're the moments that you and your loved ones are going to treasure, that you actually took the time to sit down and talk about these hard things and bond and connect over them.
Another really good podcast episode that we've recorded is with Joe and Ashley Chiarte, and they talk about all of their advanced directives, the end of life planning, and not putting your loved ones in a really uncomfortable situation of who's making what decision and there being potential conflict and chaos. but taking the time right now while you um, while you're able to avoid potential chaos and conflict.
Absolutely. And, I've experienced that in my personal life with a dear friend who passed away, and she did not have anything prepared. And there was plenty of time to prepare it. And she just wasn't ready to do that for herself and her loved ones. I can still look back and remember how difficult and painful those conversations were that we all had as a family around, what do we do now? And how do we honor her? And what did she want? And how do we go about doing this? So, those legacy conversations, as uncomfortable as they are, they're so, so important and helpful so that your family can focus on making your wishes come to fruition and remembering you well and grieving in a healthy way, right? Without the
Mhm.
added complexities of, confusion and indecision and conflict.
Yeah. Well, Kim, thank you so much for sharing all of this knowledge and some practical advice, as well as just some inspiring concepts, because I think it's just easier for us to slowly introduce these conversations rather than waiting until we're maybe emotionally swamped and we have to make other big life decisions. If we can, while we're young, while we're healthy, or whatever stage of life you're at, just start having them. Whether
Hmm.
they feel really small and inconsequential, I guarantee you're setting yourself up for success, um, to lift that burden and carry it over years and years versus trying to put it on one single conversation.
Well, yes, yes. Thanks for having me. This was a great conversation.